everyone, it's Hailey, and today I'm going to be doing the mid-year freakout book tag. So I love doing this tag every year. It's like the one tag that I make sure that I always do. And yeah, it's basically just like we're at the midway point of the year. So there are a few questions that I'm going to be answering about how my reading has been so far. And I'm not gonna lie, like I don't want to sound negative, but when I was thinking of books for this video and I was like looking at the questions, I realized that my reading year has honestly been pretty mediocre. I am like super disappointed about that, but I feel like I don't really have that many standout reads for this year. Don't get me wrong, I've read some really amazing books, but like I'll get into it as we get into the questions. Let's just get to that. The first question is, what is the best book that you've read so far in 2022? And this is kind of the question that made me realize not that I don't have a best book, but there's nothing that like really stands out to me as that #1 favorite. I feel like in past years when I read a book, I know right away, I'm like, oh yeah, that's definitely like my favorite book of the year. And it's not something that I really need to think about all that much. But this year, it's been really different because I had to think about it a lot. Like last year, I knew once I read We Are Not Free by Tracy Chee that was my favorite book. I 100% knew. And the year before that, and the year before that, like I've always known what it is, but now I was just kind of like, I guess, like, so I picked two because I'm not really sure, but I guess that my favorite book that I've read so far this year would be Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I love Emily Henry, and I think this was a really great installment in, it's not a series, they're not companions, but you know what I mean? Like she writes romances that all kind of have to do with books in some way, and I felt like this one was no exception to how incredible the other books by her are, and she definitely has like become a favorite author of mine for sure. So Book Lovers is definitely a favorite of mine of the year. Is it the #1? I don't really know yet, but the other book that I thought of was also You've Reached Sam by Dustin Tao, which I wasn't really expecting to enjoy quite as much as I did, but I was pretty blown away by that one. I felt like it did exactly what it set out to do, and it did it very well, and it just doesn't read like a debut. Like it was just such a great read, honestly. So yeah, I think that those two would be my two favorites of the year, but that being said, I kind of like, I'm not really sure if I am going to say that like one of them is my favorite. I don't know, we'll see once the end of the year comes, but yeah, it's definitely been a very interesting and different reading year. Like I feel like I kind of felt similarly at this point last year as well, but that was also like I had been moving and everything, so I was really exhausted. So I guess that like me having a new job is the new moving, but it's kind of left me not having a lot of reading time, but that's something I'm working on, so then maybe I'll have like more of a clear favorite, if that makes any sense. Question #2 is the best sequel you've read so far in 2022, and I actually have only read one sequel this year, and that is Cytonic by Brandon Sanderson. So that is the third book in the Skyward trilogy, or series actually, because I think there's another book coming out. But I didn't really love Cytonic. Like I enjoyed it, I liked the series a lot, but I was kind of let down because I liked the second book so much. I thought the second book was really great, and Cytonic I just kind of felt like was not as good. It was still enjoyable, but it just wasn't as good. So it would be the best sequel I've read because I haven't read any others, I don't think. Like I thought about it, but I don't think I've read any others, but it's not one that like completely blew me away. And apparently he has started coming out with some like short stories and compilations that are in the same world, and they add to the story, but like I don't want to have to read some short stories in order to get the whole picture of things. Maybe that's just me and that's just a pet peeve of mine, but yeah, I'm not into that. Question #3 is a new release that you haven't read yet but want to. And I didn't actually write down an answer for this one because I had a hard time kind of thinking of just one, because there are honestly so many books that have come out recently that I would really like to read, but I've kind of been in a slumpy mood obviously, so I haven't done a lot of reading. I guess I would say Tokyo Dreaming by Miko Jean is definitely one. That one just came out. I honestly don't know. There's so many. Like, that's just because Tokyo Ever After sitting next to me that I thought of that one. But the new Christina Lauren as well, Something Wilder. I haven't read Every Summer After yet by Carly Fortune, and that one has just been all over the place and it's made me really want to read it. The new Casey McQuiston. Like, there are so many. I could go on and on and on. Number 4 is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year, and I actually have 2. So we have A Million to One by Adiba Jagirdar, and this book I'm so excited for because you guys know I've mentioned this before, but I used to have an obsession with shipwrecks when I was a kid, and Tonight on the Titanic, the Mary Pope Osborne Magic Treehouse book, was my favorite out of all of them. It was that or Dolphins at Daybreak, but like for this video's purposes, it was the Titanic one, and I just enjoyed that one so much. So what that has to do with this is that A Million to One is actually about the Titanic. It's a Titanic based story, and I want to read like all the books like that. So I'm definitely excited for a new one. I think it's coming out in December. And then the other book that's coming out in December is Never Ever Getting Back Together by Sophie Gonzalez. And I've been seeing this book. It keeps on getting recommended to me on Goodreads, and I really am into it. Like, it's kind of giving me Selection vibes. It's like an LGBTQ plus, but it's like a dating show sort of thing. I can't remember exactly what it is, but I know that when I read the synopsis, I was like, oh my goodness, like this is everything that I want and more. So that definitely is one that is super on my radar. But also that answer kind of changes all the time. Like, based on what mood I'm in, it will definitely change. Question number 5 is your biggest disappointment of the year. So once again, I have 2 because I can't make decisions, but The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armez was definitely a disappointment for me. It was so hyped up, and I was expecting to like it a lot because it deals with travel, like Spain, all of those things that I like, fake dating. It just seems like a recipe for success, but it just kind of was a very average book in my opinion, and I feel like I've read books that do a similar thing, but they do it better, so I just kind of didn't fall in love with it, and since it was so hyped up, I think that's why I was let down by it, because as much as hype is a great thing, it can also be a detriment to different books, and it definitely was the case with that one. And then the other book that I would say let me down is Set on You by Amy Lee. I was so excited for this book because it's about a body positive fitness influencer, and like I just really am into fitness, so I felt like that seemed like a lot of fun. I never thought those were words that would come out of my mouth, but I really enjoy working out and everything and going to the gym, and I was super excited to read a book that focused on that. And it's an enemies to lovers story, and it's based in the gym, like that's where it starts and everything. But I just was kind of let down by this one. I wasn't a huge fan of the characters, and I felt like the execution was blah. Like, they do things in the gym locker room, and I just wasn't really a fan of that. Like, in the gym showers, I was like, do you need to? Like, that's gross. That's not sanitary. But maybe that's just me, and maybe I'm being a prude, but I just wasn't really a fan of that. That's not why, like, that's not the only reason why. I just overall wasn't really a fan of the characters, and I found the main character could kind of be a hypocrite at times, and I wasn't a huge fan of that. Yeah, it just, there were a lot of things that happened like conveniently, and I was just meh about the whole thing. Number 6 is your biggest surprises. So I would say that one of the biggest surprises for me was Verity by Colleen Hoover. It surprised me in multiple ways. So I've read Colleen Hoover before. Like, I just recently did a reading vlog reading just Colleen Hoover, and that was the first time that I've read her books in a really long time, in years. And that being said, I hadn't read any of her more like mystery stories, her thrillers. So Verity is one that I went into. I knew it was a thriller, didn't really know what to expect, but oh my goodness, it was wild. It blew my mind in the end, and like the whole way through, it was just Colleen Hoover how I'd never seen her before. And I felt like her writing really shone in that book, because sometimes with her more romancy stories, they can be very, like, a little bit too corny for my personal taste. I say that when like all I've been reading recently is romances, but sometimes there's certain lines and things, and I'm like particularly the names of her characters, I just kind of am not the biggest fan of sometimes. Like, I'm thinking of in Confess in particular, when the character's initials were OMG, and he like didn't want to show her his license because he was like, you're gonna laugh. And I'm like, who looks at someone's license and is like, oh, your initials are OMG, and then they think it's the funniest thing in the world. I don't know. It's just things like that. But that stuff was very noticeably absent from Verity, and I'm glad that it was, because I think it can work in the context of her romances, but in Verity, I think it would have brought the story down a few notches, but that wasn't there, and I felt like it did absolutely blow my mind, to be honest. And also, as someone who's not really a big fan typically of thrillers or mysteries, I was surprised by how much I actually enjoyed it in the end, because I think it was like a good mix of the writing that makes her book so like compulsively readable and that thriller aspect. Another book that really surprised me was One True Loves by Elise Bryant. It's not that I didn't expect to like this book, it's just I didn't really know what to expect going into it. I wasn't exactly sure, and I felt like it was a book that had a very good message. It dealt with that transformative period between high school and university really well. I think it's a story that a lot of people could benefit from, as this main character is struggling to make decisions for herself and what she wants to do with her whole life, but also trying to please her family at the same time. So there was a lot of introspective elements to it, and it was a very coming of age story, but it also had a lot of fun elements because it was set on this Mediterranean cruise. I loved how involved the family was. There was a romance to it and everything. It had a little bit of everything, and I was just very pleasantly surprised. Number 7 is your favorite new author. So this can be a debut author or new to you, and mine is actually a debut. I believe the book actually came out in December of last year though, but that author is Farida Abike Ayamide. I did look that up, and I think I'm saying it correctly. I apologize if my pronunciation is incorrect, but this is the author of Ace of Spades, and I was just blown away that this was a debut. Destin Tao is obviously another one where I was blown away that it was a debut, but Ace of Spades just like completely blew my mind, because it's a story where it's like a thriller, but there's a lot going on. You're questioning everything. It's dealing with institutionalized racism, and it does it so expertly well. It was a story that had my jaw dropping the entire time I was reading it. As I was flipping the pages, I was like, oh my goodness, wow, like this author really did that, and I just can't wait to read more by this author. If that first book is any indication, then I cannot even imagine what is to come. Number 8 is your newest fictional crush, and I feel like I don't really get fictional crushes anymore, I guess. I don't know, I'm not reading, I love characters obviously, but once I'm done a book, while I'm reading it, I'm reading for the characters and I'm loving the characters. I would say I'm more of like a character-driven story preference than plot, but once I'm finished the book, because my memory is literally so poor, I just remember the bigger picture of things, so I can't even remember what characters' names are. But for my fictional crush, I put the Shadow King or Alessandra, which are both from Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levenseller. Trisha Levenseller just writes really amazing books, and she also writes really amazing characters, and those are literally the two main characters that are like in a relationship, and it is like a fake relationship, but this like angsty relationship between the two of them in the Shadows Between Us, and the angst of it and everything just got me. I love how driven Alessandra is, and like how she doesn't care at all, so she would definitely be a good crush, but also the Shadow King, I wouldn't be mad at him either. Number 9 is your newest favorite character, so same sort of thing, but I put Olive from The Love Hypothesis. I would say, once again, Olive, or I think his name's Adam, but I can't honestly remember, but basically Olive, or the love interest from The Love Hypothesis, but probably Olive. I thought Olive was just a really fun and adorable character. I loved like how much she cared for her friends, and while I do think that the whole setup for the fake dating was a little bit unbelievable, I do appreciate that she was trying to do something for her friends, and I think that that definitely, like, her friends matter a lot to her. She's a really driven character. She didn't let anything stop her, but she's also kind of goofy and fun at the same time. So yeah, I do really enjoy her as a character. Number 10 is a book that made you cry, and I would say that one of my like first reads of the year is definitely one that made me cry, and that's The Cost of Knowing by Brittany Morris. It's one of those books where like you know what's gonna happen in the end, but it doesn't lessen the blow anymore. It doesn't make it any less painful when it does happen, because you're kind of hoping the whole time that it won't. But yeah, it was just like a really, really eye-opening and incredible but sad read. So it definitely is one that got me. I didn't like actually cry, because I can't even remember the last time that I actually cried reading a book, but it is one that made me emotional. It made me feel a lot. Conversely, number 11 is a book that made you happy, and I think a book that made me happy, and just an author that makes me happy, is Actor Age Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. So Talia Hibbert is an author that her books make me smile. Her characters are amazing, and her writing is so witty and just whip smart, and I adore it. I love the way that her characters talk. She writes conversation so incredibly well, and I loved the character of Eve Brown as well. I loved spending this last book with the Brown sisters. Like, as I've gotten to know them over the course of 3 books, I've fallen in love with them, and I'm so sad that that series is over, but she's writing a YA book, so that's really exciting. But yeah, she definitely writes books that make me smile. Number 12 is the most beautiful book that you've bought so far this year or received. So I bought myself a copy of Chris Rydell's Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. So they're behind all my filming equipment, so I'll show you them later. I'll do like a clip for you guys, but they are super beautiful. I love the way that he illustrated it. Definitely like took his own twist on things. Like, I love the fact that the Cheshire Cat is orange. It just brings me a little bit of joy because it makes me think of Jackson, but I love having new editions of Alice, and those are always really lovely to add to my collection. So I don't think I've really bought that many like collectible books this year, or more pretty books. So I think that, I mean, I could say books with like a beautiful cover, like Daughter of the Moon Goddess, but I'm gonna stick with my original answer because there are really beautiful illustrations inside as well. Okay, and number 13, I always think is kind of a throwaway question for me because there's so many, but what books do you need to read by the end of the year? And honestly, there's so many. Like, I could do a separate video if you wanted on my end of the year TBR, even though we're halfway through the year. I could do like my halfway through the year TBR. If you guys would like that, let me know. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in another new one soon. Bye!